This is my homemade PitchCar track. This video will give complete instructions as to how I created this track. Hopefully it will give you some ideas on how you can create your own track. These tracks are made from 1-inch thick insulating foam. The top surface is self-adhesive vinyl used to repair leather furniture. The ends of the track sections hold together using magnets resting against steel washers. This screen shows the measurements of the curves and straight sections. You may want to pause this video to write it down or find a way to print this screen. The width of this track is very close to the width of the original official PitchCar track. This screen shows the height of the upper level and the supports. This allows sections to cross one another, and it adds a lot of visual appeal to the track. The photos directly to the right of each diagram show the support upside down. This is so you can get a better idea of the true shape of each support. This screen shows all of the finished track sections I currently have. I decided on these diameters of corners because they allow me to tuck smaller corners inside of larger ones. The lengths of the track also allow for lots of variation, which could still fit together to make a complete circuit. The large box on the right is the size of the table I use. This way I can plan a track that will fit on my table. The program I'm using here is called CorelDRAW, but you can use any vector-based program such as Adobe Illustrator or SketchUp to do the job. If you don't have any of these programs, you can still make track sections without them. These programs simply help me design track layouts before game night. I'm using a hot wire foam cutter for most of the foam cutting. If you're going to do any crafting with foam, you really should buy one of these. You can make this without a foam cutter, but it'll be much more messy and difficult to cut the foam using a knife. A retractable knife is really handy for quick cuts on foam in places the hot wire cutter can't reach. Be sure to have a couple of spare blades. You'll definitely need an X-Acto knife with a full box of spare blades. I used around 25 blades on this project. A cutting mat will help you not cut up the surface of your table. It'll also help you keep your X-Acto blade sharp. For the 1-inch thick insulating foam, I used the exact product shown here. I purchased mine from Home Depot, but it's still available at most large lumber yards. It costs around $30 a sheet, and I used 2 full sheets of foam and still have some left over after finishing the track. One thing to keep in mind that even though this is 1-inch thick foam, it's not exactly 1-inch thick. Sometimes the board measures slightly less than 1 inch, and in some places the board may measure slightly more than 1 inch. Since nothing is perfect, I dealt with the thickness variation by simply applying shims under low sections of the track. These are strips of 1/16 inch thick craft foam. As long as the track steps down in the direction the discs are moving, it really doesn't matter if the joints are perfectly level or not. I found that even the official purchase tracks can have slight variations in thickness, and players will shim up low spots with strips of playing cards. The top surface of the track is a self-adhesive vinyl material used to repair leather. I purchased mine on Amazon for about $18 a roll and ended up using 3 rolls on the whole project. I like this material because the texture was fairly smooth and the adhesive held well. In all honesty, I'm pretty sure any vinyl repair material will work. I tried 4 different brands, and the disc slid fine on all of them. I like this particular brand because the texture was smooth and not overtly leather looking. As far as paint goes, for the track sides I had some leftover medium gray latex paint I used on our front porch. Keep in mind that you cannot use spray paint on foam because it will dissolve the foam. You'll have to paint the sides using a brush. For the rails, I simply used acrylic white and red craft paint. As for the rails, I used 1/2-inch square, self-adhesive, high-density insulation strips. The good things about this brand is that the strips had really good adhesion and the foam was really tough. The bad part is that it comes tightly rolled up, and the last foot in the center of the roll is pretty much unusable because it gets all kinked up. In order to make this work, I had to tape long pieces down to strips of cardboard to keep them straight while painting them. If you want black rails, then you don't need to do anything but stick them on. Since I wanted them bright red in color, I had to hand paint them with 2 coats of white acrylic craft paint. Let them dry in between coats, and then apply a coat of red acrylic craft paint. I tried to spray paint it, but it didn't cover well. Also, spray paint dries brittle and will crack when you try to bend the strip around the curve. Be sure to make the strips a couple inches longer than you need, so you have something to tape down on the ends. To connect the ends of the track, I used 3/4 inch round ceramic magnets. I don't know the exact brand I used, but I'm sure you can find something similar on Amazon. The magnets I used are not the strongest I could find, but they're strong enough to keep the track sections from sliding apart when sitting on the table. Neodymium magnets would be much stronger, but I haven't tried them. I glued these on using Gorilla Glue, and they've held on really well. All of my track ends have a magnet on the left and a metal washer on the right. If you use metal washers like I did, be sure to take a magnet with you to the hardware store. Not all metal washers have enough iron in them to stick well to a magnet, so test how well they stick before you buy a big box of washers. If you think that recessing magnets on the end might be a bit too much for your building skills, you could just put some grippy foam rubber on the bottom of the track sections to keep them from sliding around on the table. Having a tablecloth on the table, along with a grippy foam bottom, should be enough to keep track sections from sliding around without having to invest in the whole magnet idea. Just look for sponge neoprene with adhesive. The last material I used a lot of is a roll of double stick permanent tape. I use this for lots of things you'll see later on in the video. Now, the first thing we're going to do for this track is we're going to make these templates. Now, I've already showed you a diagram of the exact measurements. Just for a recap, the width of the track is actually 5 inches wide. What you make them out is up to you, but you want something that will cut clean and won't melt with a hot wire foam cutter, because we're going to take these and we're going to run them against the hot wire foam cutter. I'm currently using mat board, and I had some extra, and it's used for mounting, putting a decorative border around pictures and picture frames. You can also use foam core board, and this is board that's paper on both sides, about 1/4 inch thick, and it has foam in the middle. And you'd think, well, isn't a hot wire foam cutter going to melt the foam in the middle? Well, it does melt it just a little, but the paper is enough to keep it from really damaging the foam and foam core. Most of you, I assume, are probably just going to end up with good old corrugated cardboard for your patterns. And corrugated cardboard is just fine, but remember, when you cut it, the cuts must be clean. You don't want any ragged edges on it. To draw and cut these templates, you're going to need some basic drawing tools. You're going to need a yardstick, ruler. If you can get a square, that's nice. You can find these at office supply places in the drafting section. And then, of course, you're going to need a pencil. And you're just going to have to take your time and be exact and draw the templates exactly as I have them on the diagram. Now, for the large arcs, you're probably not going to find a compass large enough to do that. So instead, you can probably use a piece of string and 2 pencils. And if you tie the string right, you can kind of adjust the string where it's tighter or a little bit looser, depending on the radius of the arc that you want. So be sure that the knot's really tight there when you go to draw your circle. One's going to go on the center point, and the other is going to go wherever you mark the outside of the circle to be. So you'll just take your time and you'll stretch it and draw a nice smooth arc that way. And that'll give us a line that we can actually cut on to cut our arcs out. And before you start cutting out your patterns, you want to probably put your cutting mat underneath of whatever it is you're cutting on. Cutting on straight lines is going to be easy. You'll just take your ruler, set it on top of it, and you'll just cut several times with an X-Acto knife until you cut those out. Arcs are going to be a little bit trickier because you don't really have a tool to do that. My suggestion, first thing, is put a brand new blade in here. You should have at least a few extra blades that you can put in there, so if it starts to get dull or tear, you definitely need a new blade. What my suggestion is you take and you put your pencil right on the line and then cut around. And when you cut, don't use a tremendous amount of pressure. Use just kind of a light to medium pressure, and remember that as you twist the knife, the blade is going to go that way too. So this may take a couple tries of practice before you get it to do what you actually want it to do. But I would use a medium pressure. Take your time, and what you want to do is you just want to put a nice line. Now, whether you're using mat board, cardboard, or foam core, it doesn't matter. Just take your time and try to do a nice job on the lines. You want them smooth, you want them clean, and then what you'll do is you'll go back over them again. Now, once you make one cut, And if you have other lines that are in the background that are a little bit confusing, you can just take a pencil and go ahead and erase your pencil line, and the only line you have left is the cut line. From that cut line, what you can do is you can go over it again, and you will go deeper and deeper until you finally cut through it and cut the pattern. Now, after your templates are all cut out, you're going to roll out your vinyl material till you got the backing side up. Then what you're going to do is lay these templates out to try to fit them on as best you can. Now, this actually is a little shorter than it would be. My roll is actually a little longer, but I had used some already at this point. So when you're laying these out, you want to leave about 1/4 inch around each around the edge. Don't butt it right up against the side there. Go ahead and leave yourself some room, because we're gonna need that room later on. So for this particular one, I'm just gonna take and I'm just gonna draw around the outside of the template. And you don't have to be exact on this. This is just so we can place it on the foam sheets later on. So I got that one. And between the pieces, you want about 1/2 inch of room. So I'm going to put a little more space between the pieces at this point. So for this particular one, I'm just going to go ahead and draw around it. Now, after these are drawn, you're going to cut them out. And you want to cut them out with about 1/4 inch of space all the way around. So now the next thing is to go ahead and peel these and stick these onto the foam, however you can arrange them for the best way. Be sure a couple of things. Number one, make sure that surface is clean. And number two, do not put it on the printed side of the foam. Now, that may seem a little weird, but you probably can't tell, but these words that are on here, they're actually stamped in. So those words are kind of recessed. So when you lay this over the words, you're actually going to see the words under it because they're going to recess. Next thing you want to do, use your hot wire cutter to cut these foam pieces apart. Leave a little bit of foam around each one. And you might wonder, it's like, why are we going to do this, cut this twice? Because usually all of these pieces, you have about 20 of them on a giant sheet. And you really can't get to them to work with them individually. Cutting them apart individually makes it easier to work on. So we're gonna take this back to our other room after we get it out. So leave a little bit of room around it if you can, maybe 1/4 inch all the way around. If you butted pieces right next to each other, then we'll just cut right between them next to each other. After these are all cut apart, what we're going to do is we're going to take our permanent double-sided tape, and you're just going to use a couple pieces. You don't have to go crazy with it, but you also don't want this to move either. So I'm just going to put a piece. You can see tape on it where I've already done other track pieces with. I'm going to put a piece of tape here, and that should stick pretty good. So what you're going to do is center this on here. Be sure that you have a little bit of black of the vinyl all the way around. Push it down good and make sure it's not going to move. Then you're going to get a brand new blade in your X-Acto knife. Like I said, change your blade, and you're going to take your time. This may take a little practice, but what you're going to do is you're going to cut right across the end of it here. You're going to just follow that edge. Now, don't cut into your pattern, and you don't want to cut away, so be sure that the angle of your blade is actually going straight. So one cut usually should do it. So push in, and you can cut into the foam a little bit, but I kind of cut in and then I kind of gently push the knife against it all the way back. So what you do is you'll cut through that, and then you're going to peel this excess. Come on, peel this excess off. Now, when I come around to the other end, I'll have enough there. But anyway, that is a nice clean cut, and we know underneath we have a nice sharp edge for the edge of our track. So we're going to go ahead and do that all the way around. Now, I do want to mention something about a hot wire foam cutter you're probably aware of, but you might not be if you're not familiar with them. What it is we have the pattern on top, and we're going to go ahead and cut through the foam. Now, watch what happens. We're going to put it right here, and then we're going to start cutting the foam. But as we press this against the wire, watch what happens. See how it bends that wire? That means if we cut by pushing our pattern against the wire, the bottom is going to be cut at an angle inside. So we don't want crooked sides, we want straight sides. So that's kind of a problem. The way I figured to solve that problem is I flip the piece over, and I put the pattern down on the table. Now watch what happens when the pattern is down on the table and I try to cut. When I push, it doesn't really do much of anything. So I don't get that angle in the wire if the pattern is touching the tabletop. Now the problem we're going to have is when we cut this and the pattern is down, we're cutting blind. We don't know where that pattern is. So that's one of the reasons I kind of pre-cut around the foam and left a little bit around. I kind of know what the shape of this is, and I kind of know where the pattern is underneath of it. Usually what I do to cut this is I start in the middle and I work my way out. So I'm just going to kind of demonstrate this. I'm going to turn my cutter on here so it's hot enough to cut. And I'm going to start in the center, and I'm going to work my way out both ways. So let's see if I can kind of zoom into the wire so you can kind of see this cutting a little bit more here. So you'll notice it'll kind of smoke occasionally, but I'm going to go ahead and cut in until I can feel it hitting that pattern. And then I'm slowly going to rotate it. Take your time. Take your time. The more time you take and the more even you push this, the better and cleaner your cut will be. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this all the way to the end. There we go. I've cleared the end on that side. Now I'm going to start in the middle again. Make sure it's I'm kind of moving it as I'm touching the pattern. And then we're going to start this way down the middle, and we're going to go down the other side. Now our pattern is underneath on the bottom, gently pressing against that wire, and I'm putting just a light pressure against it to make sure that that pattern stays pushed against that wire. Oh, there we go. That's the end of it, and that's what we have right there. Now you'll notice that the middle part, we've got a little bit of a little bit of a scorch there, a little bit of a recess, but it's okay. Once you paint over with that paint, you're not going to see it. So I'm going to go ahead and do all of the sides, starting in the middle and working my way out. Now, after we cut this thing looks pretty good. So what you'll do is you'll take the pattern, you'll peel it off. If for some reason the double stick tape kind of stuck more, then just gently push that back down with your thumb like it was never there, okay? Because here the double stick tape wanted to pull it up a little bit. But what we have is we've got the top onto it, and we've got a nice clean edge between the top and the sides, and we've got a nice clean cut piece. That's exactly what we want to get. Now our next step is to make the recesses where the magnet and the washer are going to go. Let's get kind of up close here. We got a magnet and washer, and we just kind of drop one against the other. What happens? Okay, it didn't really drop in the middle, did it? Okay, well let's try to push it over and push it in the middle. Wait, it's not wanting to go in the middle, is it? If I push it down here, see how it's kind of avoiding the middle? Because of that, it occurred to me if I place the washers and the magnets at equal distance from each end, whenever I put the track together, the track's going to want to slide this way or the slide that way because the magnet and the washer doesn't want to go in the center of each other. So in order to solve this problem, what I've done is for the washer, I'm going to measure 1 inch in to the center. And for the magnet, I'm going to measure 1 1/4 inches in to the center. So the magnet will be slightly offset and not line up directly with the washer. Now I made myself a little jig to indicate which one is going to be the magnet and which one's going to be the washer. And what I do is I take this jig and I line it up on the end here. And you'll notice I wrote this side up because if I flipped it around the other way, this side would be shallow, that would be deep, and the magnet and washer side would be switched. So don't get this upside down. Be sure to get it the right way up. So I made the jig there, and from the center of this side is 1 inch, and the center of this side is 1 1/2 inch. And all I do is I take this and I line it up on the edge. This doesn't have to be perfect. This is just a reminder for me of where about I'm going to be cutting this thing. So I'm just going to draw a line here. And I'll draw a line there, and I'll draw a line across here, and I'll draw a line there. So when I get done with my jig, I've got an idea of exactly this deeper one is going to be the magnet, and this shallower one is going to be for the washer. What we're going to do next is a little complicated, so bear with me. What we want to do is we want to cut the recesses for our magnet and the recess for our washers. And I'm going to use this drill press to do it. This is the drill press. You can kind of see the chuck here. And to cut it, I'm going to suggest using a zip bit. This is from a zip tool usually used to cut holes in sheetrock. Basically, it's a drill bit that kind of cuts on its side as well as drilling down. So we're going to use this to cut. You can also use something like an end mill, which is actually what I used for my main project, was an end mill. But this is kind of expensive and kind of hard to find. Now this roto tool is about a 1/4 inch away from the tabletop surface. This block is about a 1/4 inch thick, or you can use a rule to measure it approximately. It's not real critical if it's exactly a 1/4 of an inch or not. The next thing you're going to need is a block, and you can cut a groove out of it, but cut a small groove unless you're like I am, and I use this mill tool, this end mill, and this end mill needed a lot of space. We have this block in place, and we're going to need double stick tape for this. So let's start with this block and double stick tape. Flip the block over on the back, and we're going to put a couple of strips on it, and this is to hold this block in place. And we'll get to exactly where this block is supposed to go in just a moment. But we got double stick tape on it. It's ready to go. Next thing we want to do is we want to make sure that this surface is nice and clean, because when we stick this block down, we want it to stay. And if you got dust and crud all over it, it won't really stick down really well. So we're going to use another block of some kind, just a flat surface. It doesn't matter what it is. And we're going to take it and we're going to press it against this zip bit. And then we're going to take 2 magnets, because we're going to be cutting a groove the depth of these magnets. So I'm going to take 1 magnet and put it on one side, 1 magnet and put it on the other side. And since it's a metal tabletop, they'll kind of sit in place. And I'm going to press and hold this block against that drill bit. Then we're going to take our block with our groove, and we're going to flip it over, and we're going to gently, while pressing this against the drill bit, we're going to gently rest this against the magnets, and that should be the right width about. And then we're going to press this sucker down really well. I turned it around so you could see, but if you see the block here, the flat plane of the block of this edge of the zip bit and the flat plane of this edge of the magnets are all the same. So let's go ahead and cut one of these. The deeper one is the one the magnet's supposed to go in, so we'll cut that one. We'll turn this on, push it all the way against there, push it back, and then pull it back out. And that's it. We've got our recess cut. So if we take a look at this, you'll notice that that piece didn't really come out because it kind of went beyond, but you can just kind of take this and pull this. And really, that's it right there. And if you take a magnet and drop it in, that is the perfect depth for the magnet to be. Now for our washers, we're going to follow the same process. Only on the block, I've kind of double stuck washers to this with tape. That's because when I try to hold this here, the washers kept falling off. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to push this against the bit here. And then our piece with a groove on it, and it's got double stick tape on the back. I'm going to take and center it on that drill bit, and I'm going to put it right against there. So that should be just the right depth for our washers. Okay, that's the piece for our washer. That's the depth there. And that's what the washer looks like when it sets in. So it's just the right depth. After all the recesses are cut, the painting is pretty easy. Be sure that you have yourself a wet paper towel and have several of these. We'll use those to kind of clean the top if we get a little messy. So what I'm going to do is dip it in the latex paint that I have here, and I'm just going to paint the sides with it here. Let's see if we can get that in the camera. So I'm just kind of jamming it into the recesses. And we're just going to paint all of the sides on. Now when I get up close to painting the top here, what I usually do is I just kind of go up like this, kind of press it up, and kind of go in a little upward direction like that. Now sometimes you might get, see I did pretty good there, but sometimes you might get paint across the top. If you do, then immediately take a wet paper towel and just wipe across it to kind of clean the edge like that. Once this is completely painted, get yourself some extra chunks of foam. You should have a lot of scraps left over laying around after this job. Set it down there, and then just place this kind of in the center of it so it'll keep it off the table. You won't get paint on the table, and it will dry nicely that way. Once the paint is dry, it's time to glue the magnets on. I'm going to use the clear Gorilla Glue, and it doesn't take a lot of glue. Finish up all the curves, the last thing we need to do is go ahead and attach the rail. The rail, once again, I had painted it 2 coats of white paint, 1 coat of red paint. Otherwise, red don't show up because red's a transparent color. I taped it to the cardboard to lay it out straight. So at this point, what I'm going to do is remove it. And of course, I made this a couple inches longer than it needed to be because the ends are, not painted. They had tape on them. So this is kind of weather stripping. So there's a strip on the bottom that peels off and you'll stick it on the corner. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to take, and this particular weather stripping is really good sticky stuff. So I've got that peeled off. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to overlap this corner here a bit and make it go past. And I kind of pre-measured this to make sure that I had enough to go around the corner. And this is one of the more damaged pieces. Since I'm using kind of leftovers to do the video, if you look at this rail and go, dang, that's kind of kinked up. Well, I used the better stuff on the, my original track that I made. So what I'm doing is I'm just using my finger to stick it down, and I'm kind of feeling that that's kind of flush with the backside of the track. And like I said, this stuff is really sticky, and since we use latex paint, the paint's not cracking, the paint's flexible, so I can kind of push down on it without destroying the paint. Now we have this excess hanging over we need to trim off. You can use just a regular X-Acto or hobby knife. I happen to have some straight edge razors that I use for scraping paint off of glass and that sort of thing. What I'm doing is I'm eyeballing it straight down, and I'm putting the razor straight down on it so I can kind of tell that I'm going at it, completely vertically. And then what I do is I just kind of do a little sawing motion, take it all the way down like that until it's done. And there we go. We have the end cut, and cut pretty nicely. We'll do that on both ends. The last piece I'm going to show you how to make is a ramp. This ramp is 4 inches tall. So basically what happens is you can have track run underneath it. And this end will have magnets and washers up here. So if you attach something up above, it's actually 4 inches to the top, and it's 3 inches to the underside. And most of the track is a 1-inch track. So we have kind of a 2-inch gap in between here. Since the ramp is 4 inches tall, we're going to take 4 inches of foam and stack it up to make a ramp. So what you're going to do is you're going to cut 2 pieces that are 10 inches long. We're going to cut 1 piece that's the 7.5 inch long and 1 piece that's a 5 inch long. You'll have templates for these already because you cut these particular sizes for track sections. What we're going to do is we're going to stack them up just like this. And before we do anything else, we're going to go ahead and cut the ends for the washers and magnets, because you notice this has got washer and magnet up above at the top. So I'm going to cut washers and magnets in this one for the top of it, and I'm going to cut washers and magnets in the bottom one for the bottom part of it. Now to cut the slope evenly, we're going to have to cut a template for each side so we can run this thing through the wire foam cutter without it being crooked and crazy. So this particular template, I'll go ahead and put up on the screen. This is exactly what the template dimension should be. So you'll want to pause the video or take a screenshot or something, but I'll also kind of describe it here. Okay, once you get this template cut, you'll notice that we have 2 identical ramp shaped pieces. And what we're going to do is we're going to put one on one side, one on the other side, and that's what we're going to run through the hot wire foam cutter to cut our edge for us. In order to do that, the first thing we're going to do is we need to tape these blocks together, but we don't want to get chunks of tape in between where this blade is going to go, because the hot wire blade is going to hang up if we have double stick tape, if it's going to be hitting into that. So what we're going to do is we're going to temporarily just tape this together so we kind of know where the pieces are. Remember that we've got washers cut on this side, washers cut on that side. Be sure that those pieces are in their correct position. That'll hold. Okay, so I'm going to set this up against here, and I'm going to go ahead and take a Sharpie marker, and I'm going to mark the side of it. I want to make sure where not to stick tape. So if I take this top piece off, I know that right here the knife cutter is going to go, and I know that right here the knife cutter is going to go. So right about there, I want to make sure that I don't put any tape here. All the tape's going to have to be back here when I tape it together. Same way when I go here, I can tell right about here is where the knife blade is going to go, and I probably want to stay a little back from that line, so I don't want to put any tape there. And at the very end here, we're probably going to lose the last little bit, so I would say it's probably safe to just not put any tape down here either, just to make sure that that hot wire blade doesn't affect any, doesn't get hung up on any tape. Now at this point, we're going to go ahead and double stick this thing together good, since we know where we can put tape. It's assembled, go ahead and double stick the two sides on it as a guide for our hot wire cutter, and we'll go ahead and cut this thing. Okay, now the adventure begins. What we're going to do is I'm going to run it through this way. I'm going to start at the highest part and go back down to the lowest part, because it's a little hard to start at the low one. It's, trying to get the wire in the right place. If we start at the top, we can actually rest this wire against the two top parts of the template and then slowly work our way down. Now when we're going through, watch where your hands are, because if you're holding it like this and you come down to the hot wire, what's going to happen to your hand? So be sure that your hand is out of the way when we go down. So I'm going to hold this kind of up, and I'm going to make sure that it's touching top and bottom, and I'm going to gently push against, and that way I can kind of feel that it's hitting both top and bottom. And we're just going to move it through at a kind of a reasonably slow speed. Take our time, and it's not going to be a perfect cut. So let's see, hands out of the way, make sure that it's touching the wire top and bottom, and then we're slowly just going to run this down. Here we go. What do we got? Now I've gone ahead and popped the sides of our template off, so we just have foam now. You'll notice that the front edge is kind of lifted up a little bit. What I'm going to do just to fix that is I'm going to gently just take a knife and not cut too far, but I want to cut off that edge right there, because that edge just is going to be a little hard to work with. Don't cut too far back. Let's see. Come on. There we go. Okay, so we've got that cut back. Now you'll notice that this is not really super smooth. We've kind of got a ridge here, and that's because when it gets to a thin edge, it melts more. And so what we're going to do is we're going to smooth it out. I've got a piece of 60 grit sandpaper here, and if you get a spray can of some kind, it doesn't matter what kind, I'm just going to wrap it around a spray can, and then I'm just going to go over the surface like that. At this point, I'm going to use a piece of cardstock. This is basically poster board, but you can find this is 8.5 by 11. I'm going to cut a piece of our leather material, probably around 6 inches wide, a little wider than we need. And we have one edge that's completely nice and straight. At this point, we're going to flip it over, and we want to cut a perfect 5-inch wide, because this track is 5 inches wide. After I've sanded it, you see we can't get it perfectly smooth. Whenever you sand these fine edges, sometimes they'll break off. And so that's why we need the cardstock underneath it. But I did get the bottom ridge pretty smooth. I'm going to use this 3M Super 77. It is an aerosol spray glue, but you'll have to take it outside and you'd spray the back of it really well. And set it on there and just gently be sure that you get it in the right spot. And then just press it down really well, and it should stick well. Now, as far as other glues, you could use a craft glue like Aleene's Tacky Glue. I'm hesitant to use any glue that's too thin, because you don't want it to warp. Because we got paper on the back, and paper does tend to warp, but you might experiment with that on a spare piece to see if that would work. Another option is rubber cement. If you have rubber cement handy, you can flip it over, apply rubber cement here, apply rubber cement here, let it dry, and then very carefully set it on its side where you've got a nice straight edge, and then stick it on that way with rubber cement. Rubber cement will hold it pretty well. All right, now that it's glued in place, we're pretty much done except for trimming the ends. You'll notice that it's pretty smooth, but there's still just a few little lumps here and there, but not enough that's going to cause the disc to get stopped or stuck or anything like that. So to trim the ends, I'm just going to put it on the cutting mat, trim it upside down. I'm going to flip it upside down like that. Then I'm going to take my knife, and I'm just going to very carefully just cut along this edge a couple of times until that's gone. And when you're ready to cut this side's a little more difficult because, you know, they got a bend here. So what you can do is you can kind of lift up the cutting mat and then kind of do it up in the air like this. And if you lift it up like that, then you can kind of get the cutting mat right where you need it. And then you can run the knife along there and go ahead and trim that edge as well. Now that you have the idea how this works, this is one that I made for kind of a ramp that goes around the corner. This is the same plan as the corner templates that we have for the large curves. This one goes 4 inches high, of course. I don't have the templates written down, but you can kind of see that's what I stuck on both sides.